So you have your book along with you?
Yes, I do.
Great. So namaste and assalamu alaikum, Dr. S.Y. Quraishi, and welcome to the Author Experience Conversations. Many of our people who are joining us in the audience are looking forward to learning from your insights. The thoughts in the book have created some intrigue, value for people to understand what are the myths that you have debunked and busted in the book. So welcome once again, Dr. Quraishi. Pleasure having you with us and a pleasure having all our audience with us. And like I had said earlier, namaste and assalamu alaikum once again to you.
Thank you very much,
So
Jerry.
Dr. Quraishi, it's a pleasure being with you on this talk to have a cool, candid, crucial conversation about the several myths that you busted about the population myth, as your book is called. And if you just want to show it to all the people in our audience who are watching us on Facebook Live, a warm welcome to all of them also to join us for joining us on Facebook Live and making the time to learn from Dr. Quraishi about the myths that he's busted in this particular book. So Dr. Quraishi, it's been a long journey. I've known you for some time. You are our ex-Karmavir Global Fellow and Karmavir Puraskar Award recipient. And this year, I'm happy to inform you that we've also nominated you for the Karmavir Maharatna Award, which we instituted last year. But we couldn't have the award last year because of the corona pandemic and lockdown. But you've been doing amazing, phenomenal work, not just in your official position, but also as a citizen of India. And I think that is why we had chosen you for the Karmavir Puraskar Award almost a decade ago. And it was a pleasure working with you on the electoral reforms along with Dr. M.C. Raj, a Dalit leader who we had chosen to kind of put that entire concept of how to move from first past the post to proportionate representation in a democracy, a large, vibrant democracy like India. Because we blindly adopted the first past the post from the United States and the UK without really studying democracies that really have more, more progressive forms of government. And I'll pick your brains on that also a little later when we get into the conversation. So to begin with, Dr. Quraishi, tell us a little more about your life story and your journey of life, right from childhood to your days in the IAS, to becoming the chief election commissioner, and now as an author who's writing books based on very insightful research and study that you conduct. So please walk us through your journey, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. I am a product of Delhi, old Delhi, where my family has lived for more than 500 years. We lived in the walled city of Delhi, where I was born. My father, my grandfather, they were all born there. And I grew up in crowded streets of old Delhi and studied there. And then I went on to do my history honors and MA. Also from a historic college, St. Stephen's College. My school was Anglo-Arabic school, which is the oldest living school in North India. So 1692 onward, it has been non-stop working. And then I went to the St. Stephen's College, which is the oldest college. And I was born in a family of scholars, religious scholars. My father, great grandfather, his father, they all wrote 50, 60, 100 books on philosophy, philology, Islam. And my father, interestingly, was between the older generation and the modern generation because he joined the same St. Stephen's College, which was then called Mission College in the 1920s. So, in fact, when he joined Mission College, there was a kind of a social boycott in the community because they thought that he was going to a Christian mission college and what has happened to the Muslim scholarly family. So, but he actually became a very interesting, good link because he continued the family tradition and at the same time brought in modern thinking, and we benefited a lot from that. So that is in brief my childhood and my boyhood. After doing my MA in history, I became a lecturer. For 2 years, I taught history in Delhi College evening. I was 22, and all the students were employed, 35, 40. So I had to wear dummy glasses to look a little older than I was, to be taken seriously. And in during that period, those dummy glasses became a part of my personality. So I continued with the same dummy glasses till 1984, when my eyesight started demanding spectacles. These are real for sure, and but that teaching experience was also very good. That gave me the confidence. At the same time, I found teaching a little frustrating, because the quality of my lectures in first year was almost reproducing my MA notes from St. Stephen's. And whereas I found that you need to teach from a school book, so I switched over to L. Mukherjee, which was a 8th class textbook, very well written though. So then I started thinking that if my level comes down to this, that's not no good, and I decided to sit for the examination, civil services. Fortunately, I made it in my very first attempt, and here I am. I was allotted Haryana cadre. Fortunately, close to Delhi, which was good for me. I liked it. It was a very dynamic cadre with Bansilal, making it into the most happening state in the country. And I learned my ropes in administration in Haryana, and at a time when their performance and delivery was considered extremely important for a civil servant.
And then, sir, you were the chief election commissioner of India in a
Yeah,
very
that
crucial
was much
time.
later.
Yeah, that
Yes.
was much later. So do you
Yeah,
want
yeah.
to tell us about your days in the office? What were some of the reforms that you brought about?
Well, yeah, so very good question. My own feeling was that wherever in the IAS I was posted, if I'm the bright officer, which we all think we are, heaven born and blue-blooded, so we have to prove it by our performance and not just by arrogance and stiff neck. So my philosophy was that wherever you go, you have to leave that job better than you had found it. Which is why everywhere I was posted, my attempt was to, besides the normal work which you have to do anyway, but you had to leave behind a legacy which you can be proud of and which will benefit the people. So everywhere, right from my DM days, in every post I left something interesting, some legacy which has survived most of the things. For instance, in my very first posting in Sonipat in 73 to 75, I started a vegetable and fruit marketing cooperative, because these being people, farmers who are producing vegetables and fruit, but cooperative society. There's a lot of vision from the then commission and then the Mandiwala, and that's a society survived for almost 40 years. I don't still exist. The fact that last year I deputy commissioner in the education as
Dr.
20.
Qureshi, your Wi-Fi is lagging. I'm afraid your Wi-Fi is lagging and your voice is not coming across clear.
My Wi-Fi.
Yes, your Wi-Fi is lagging. It is
Some
hanging. It's weak. It's showing low bandwidth on the app. Dr.
now just
S.Y.
see
Qureshi's
how is
network
it doing?
bandwidth is low, it's saying. So we can't even see you now.
Now just see.
No, no,
Has it
no,
improved?
no, not at all. Have you logged in from the Wi-Fi at home? Yes.
Yes, Wi-Fi at home, and I've changed it to better Wi-Fi.
Okay.
And yeah, from 8 Mbps to 80 Mbps, it should be fine now.
Okay. Please proceed. We can see you
Right.
back now. Go ahead. Please proceed with
Yeah,
what you were telling us.
yeah. So I was telling you, whichever job you have, you can make improvements, and you should leave some legacy behind. And coming to the election commission, which was since it is a post outside the government, you have to resign. But I had to resign from the IAS a year before my due retirement, and there also I found that there are many things which you could do, and the 4 or 5 reforms which I did have survived me. One, that I had given myself 2 challenges when I took over as a CEC in my inaugural press conference. I said the voter apathy, particularly of the so-called educated people
Right.
who don't go out to vote and brag about it. Oh, I've never voted in my life. Then you have no business to sit in your drawing room and criticize the politician, because without politicians there is no democracy, and all politicians are not corrupt. In fact, India has become a major power thanks to political leadership over the years. So, therefore, that was a wrong attitude which I wanted to address. And I set up a voter education division from in 2010, and every election since then has led to the record turnout, highest increasing turnout, and highest ever turnout. So virtually a participation revolution. I'm proud of that. So there are several things which I did for that under that division. For instance, creation of a National Voters Day every 25th of January, where we organize 8 lakh functions across the country, 8 lakh functions for new voters whom we enroll and give them their voter card and celebrate. The second thing which I did was to control money power, because the abuse of money power was rampant. In
Right.
fact, in my book on the election called An Undocumented Wonder, The Making of the Great Indian Election, I had identified 40 abuses of money, the modus operandi which we were familiar, which we had detected till then. So this expenditure monitoring division tried to control money power substantially, but I'm sorry to say that this is the only unsolved problem, because till then, since then, politicians have found newer ways of abusing money.
Right.
Third was, as I mentioned, National Voter Day. Everybody who will become 18 was identified before 1st of January, the due date, and how we organize 8 lakh functions. And every year it has become a national function every year. So that was an innovation. I also set up an institute called India International Institute of Democracy and Election Management, IIIDEM, basically to train our own election staff, which is about 12 million on the election day. Although permanent staff is just about 500 in Delhi and 500 in rest of the country. But on election, it is 12 million. They have to give you a zero error election, which means you have to give them good training. So we set up this institute. And since we had this facility, we thought, why don't we throw it open to election management across the world? So I'm very happy to say that in last 6-7 years, 85 countries have got training from us already. Most of these countries have sent their entire commission to learn from us and their top election management. So we have leadership of the democratic world through this training institute. So these are some of the things which I did in the election commission, which have survived. I'm glad.
So in your tenure, I think Congress was in power. And how was it working, in the Chief Election Commissioner's office during that regime? Did you have the freedom to kind of work, or was there interference from the political party?
Absolutely, no interference at all, total freedom, because that is how it is designed by the Constitution.
Right.
Constitution has made it an independent and autonomous institution,
Yes.
uh, and once appointed, although government of the day, which appoints you, but you have to distance yourself from the same government.
Right.
And which is why I mentioned when I joined, I was in the IAS, one more year to retire, but
Right.
I resigned from the IAS so that
Right.
my umbilical cord with the government was cut,
Right.
and I'm independent. And there was no attempt to interfere in our working whatsoever at all. And even if somebody tried and they may have thought that, look, we appointed you,
Right.
and we used to hear some loose comment. Now these guys were our joint secretaries and they used to toe our line. So they expected us to behave like joint secretaries forever. So, but their, these fancy thoughts were completely knocked out in no time. Um,
Right. So I completely appreciate what you're saying, that the election commissioner's office is an autonomous body. The entire office is autonomous and should not have any interference from any political party. And I'm happy that you distance yourself from the government in power at that time, because you needed to kind of run this uh, in a principled way. And prior to you, I always say that if there are any three people besides you who have made the chief election commissioner's office in India a very highly respected office, it was Session Krishnamurthy and James Michael Lingdo. And Dr. Krishnamurthy and James Michael Lingdo are also Karmavir Puraskar Award recipients. But then, in between, there was a spell where there was a puppet who was appointed called Navin Chawla. Are there any insights you want to share with us on that?
Well, in any case, perhaps it was a mistake to appoint somebody who was identified with the political party. His
Right.
association with that party was too well known, and which is why it became his liability, in my incidentally,
Right.
because
And that's when the office lost credibility again.
yeah, in fact, 205 MPs wrote a petition to the president challenging his appointment, and Mr. Gopalaswamy even wrote to the president seeking his removal,
Right.
which was, of course, sad and unfortunate. But I found when Mr. Chawla was the CEC
Right.
for about 13 months, I did not notice anything objectionable, anything which will indicate that he is working on somebody's instruction from outside. So maybe that is the kind of responsibility which comes with the chair.
Right.
So personally, in those 13 months, Mr. Chawla conducted himself with great dignity and neutrality.
Right. Oh,
But before becoming CEC, there were some controversial decisions which
right.
Mr. Gopalaswamy pointed out. But fortunately, it is a three-member commission,
Right.
and when they were on two ends of the spectrum, they needed a moderator, and I became the moderator automatically. So with the results, there were 4 or 5 judgments which were split judgment, majority judgments, and about at least 5, and they were all very fine and correct, because one or two went in favor of Mr. Chawla, more of them went in favor of Mr. Gopalaswamy, and I think I played the moderator with all honesty.
Right. And then you revived, you reclaimed and tried to preserve the credibility of that office again after Navin Chawla. But that said, sir, well, whether it is Congress at that time who had appointed a tainted person and a puppet as the CEC, to now with the BJP in power, and again the chief election commissioner's office has lost credibility, because you don't you have so many murmurs of the entire process of democracy and elections being kind of stage managed or being fixed. What are your thoughts on that, sir? Do you want to share something so that our audience can learn that whether it is BJP or Congress, nobody is holier than thou or cleaner than the other? So, what are your thoughts on that?
Hey, it will be inappropriate of me to comment on the present election commission. But whatever we do is an open book, with whether we are transparent or whether we are fair, neutral or not. Everything is known to the public, and the fact that questions are asked from time to time, whenever,
Right.
it's a sad situation, and there is a root cause for that, which I would like to share with you.
Please, please.
that the most powerful election commission in the world has the
Yeah.
most effective system of appointment. We are appointed by the government of the day.
Right.
Now, nowhere in the world, nowhere, the government of the day appoints. It is always a collegium, and
Right.
in many cases, the entire parliament.
Right.
And in fact, the collegium makes a short, long list and a short list, and then people are interviewed by the entire parliament
Right.
uh, in a live telecast in some countries, so
Right.
that the whole nation sees who are the candidates being considered.
Right.
So at least we can have a collegium. We are familiar with collegium system. We have collegium for all judge appointment of the judges, for
Right.
the CIC, for the CVC, even director of CBI, who is
Right.
not even a constitutional body. He is not even a body. He is just a government department, like Department of Agriculture. So, but Supreme Court, in its wisdom, thought that since it could be abused by the authorities, so the appointment should be through a collegium. Now, and that collegium consists of Prime Minister, the Chief Justice, and the Home Minister. So imagine such a high-powered collegium. So the most powerful commission in the country, Election Commission of India, is just appointed by the government of the day. That is a flaw. And I'm saying it not because I'm now retired. As CEC, it was Karan Thapar who first asked me whether collegium system would have been better. I said I would have been happier, I would have felt stronger if leader of opposition was signatory to my appointment. Now, leader of opposition being in the collegium is absolutely essential, so that all parties have equal faith in your neutrality,
Right.
which is extremely important for an institution like Election Commission.
Right. And I'm happy that you brought up the topic of this collegium, because that is exactly what we had proposed in the campaign for election reforms in India, the SERI campaign, as it was called. And going back a decade, almost a decade, 2011-12 is when we all met in Berlin with several electoral experts from around the world, and along with Mr. Krishnamurthy and Mr. Lingdo's insights. We then shared the entire manifesto with you. And I remember within the week, you set up a committee to look into that and say that this must be implemented, because we surely need to move from first past the post to proportionate representation, because every community, every religion, every caste should have proportionate representation in the Lok Sabha, and that's missing. And yet, like you said, I mean, it's always the ruling party which appoints the CEC rather than a collegium. So what are some of those reforms you think which need to be seen in our electoral process?
Yeah, when I wrote my book, An Undocumented Wonder,
Right.
The Making of the Great Indian Election, just wait for a minute, let me show you the book.
Yes, yes, yes.
This is what it looked like in the beginning.
Right.
And this was the third reprint updated.
Very
and
nice.
And this is what it looks like now. This is the fifth edition, which is
Right.
in paperback, updated till 2019.
Right. And
So
this is published by Rupa, is it?
this is published by Rupa.
Okay.
So what was the question, Jay?
So I was talking to you about how we had given you the SERI manifesto campaign for electoral
Correct.
reforms in India.
Correct.
And what are
Correct.
some of those reforms you think should
Yes.
be implemented immediately? Because neither the Congress implemented it, nor do I think the BJP is interested to implement it. But before you start, Sai, I would love to appreciate your integrity not to comment on the election commissioner's office since you have retired. And I hope all the people in the audience who are watching notice that integrity, that you've not commented on the election commissioner's office, which is again a puppet office. I'm saying it straight because I'm a citizen of India. Please go ahead, sir. Share your thoughts on the electoral reforms that are needed in India.
When I wrote my book, Undocumented Wonder, for the first time in 2014, in that book, I described various electoral systems, and I batted for the first part of the post system as a very simple system that we had been using it for 60 years, and its simplicity, while I described the other system. But after the 2014 election, I had to change my opinion. Why? Because in UP, we saw BSP got 20% vote share with zero seat. Now,
Right.
20% vote share and zero seat, this is in principle against the participatory democracy. Now,
Right.
20% voters, their opinion doesn't matter. It becomes zero in first past the post system. Since then, I have changed my opinion to proportional representation, which is what you were fighting for, you and Mr.
Right.
Raj and his wife.
Doctor. Yeah.
And
Yes.
I came round to, initially, I wasn't very impressed with your demand and suggestion. But later on, when I saw
we,
it in
we,
action,
we, we right. We will
yeah,
forgive you for that.
because
Just
when I
kidding.
saw, no, because after all, first part, the post system is basically a simple system, no doubt. And I've given
Yes.
all the merits and demerits of all the systems. But after seeing what happened in 2014, 20% vote share leading to zero seats, that is when I decided to change my opinion. And I've been studying this subject. You guys have studied it in great detail. And you had mentioned the German model, and I think it's a good model where it is 50-50. Half the
Just
seats.
to just to interject over this, not the German model. We had studied several European models, which employ PR rather than FPTP.
Yeah, quite right.
Yes.
So you
Yeah.
examined all the models. Everybody who talks of the German model, having seen all
Right.
other. Now,
Right.
German model
Right.
is still considered the best. Now, closer home in Sri Lanka and very recently in Nepal, they have adopted again a mixed model where half the seats are through the first part, the post, and the other half are through proportional representation. Suppose we had proportional representation, BSP instead of getting zero seat, at least would have had 8, 9, 10 seats, at least would have some voice in parliament. So that is the crux. And in my future book on South Asia electoral challenges and reform, I'm going to bat for the proportional representation, as you had expounded initially,
Right.
uh, very forcefully.
Yes, I mean we were very passionate about it because I mean we studied everything for almost 5 years before finally finally handing over the manifesto to you in 2012. And yes, we were happy that even though you were not agreeing completely with us at that time, you still did set up a committee to look into the findings and understand the discovery that we had done. So thank you so much for that. So the entire process of first past the post, the basic flaw is today, whether they are independent candidates or smaller parties, they can all be bought off through horse trading. And and nowadays, what I've realized, in the past decade or so, from the time I started working with a few politicians to plan their campaigns, etc., that today politicians and political parties operate like hedge funds. They invest in independent candidates, they invest in smaller parties, because whoever wins, it's a windfall for them, because they've invested in everybody. So the idea to co-opt them into their party becomes very easy. You can see it today. Almost every politician from Congress is in the Bharatiya Janata Party. So is it BJP anymore? It's actually the Congress party at work, because everybody from Congress has moved to BJP. And I think therein lies the flaw of first past the post. Any thoughts that you have to share on that?
Yeah, in fact, yeah, you're absolutely right. The horse trading is the biggest bane of electoral system in India. In fact, I've written somewhere that these days it is foolish to fight election. Don't contest election. You can buy them later.
Right,
So, which is what one party is doing. They're not bothered about the election. Why invest so much of effort and money in
right,
fighting an election? Let
right,
the election happen and then
right,
buy them all, buy them wholesale, and suddenly one party changes color.
right,
The turncoat governments.
right,
It's a bane of democracy. It's a shame. They are corrupting democracy of the country.
right. And everybody, if you see the chatter on Facebook, and just for you as a caveat and for the entire audience, I'm not a fan of any party. I don't like Congress, I don't like BJP, I don't like Aam Aadmi Party. or BSP. Like when Mahua Moitra makes impassioned speeches in the Lok Sabha, I'm like, why doesn't she speak like that against against Mamta Banerjee also? Because Mamta Banerjee did the same things in West Bengal. She stifled the voice of the students, she stifled the voice of the labor, and she's done so many wrongs herself. So whether it's any party, regional or national, they are all the same kind of merd, like we call them in Goa. Merd in Portuguese means crap. Now, the basic idea is that we as public are left with little choices, and it's a choice to choose, like I always say, between the devil, the deep sea, and the ravine. You fall into the ravine, you will die. You fall into the deep sea, you may drown. So you stand a chance of fighting the devil, and that's what I wrote in my open letter to Modi when he became prime minister in 2014. I said, don't think you have won. You've not won. It's just that people have chosen the lesser evil because people were fed up of Congress, right? Now, in a situation like this, where almost every politician is like duplicitous and a hypocrite, and on the other end, you have the citizenry. And I always say, we are not just the world's largest democracy, we are also the world's largest hypocrisy, because we don't really want to participate in politics. We think participating in politics is not the right thing to do. And there's this old quote by Bertolt Brecht, where he says the worst illiterate, and you mentioned this a little earlier about the apathy of the voter, where they don't come to vote and they take pride in it, and then just kind of do the whining and whimpering at home about how corrupt the government is, how dirty the country is. And he said the worst illiterate is the political illiterate. He hears nothing, sees nothing, takes no part in political life. He doesn't seem to know that the cost of living, the price of beans, of flour, of rent, of medicines, all depend on political decisions, whether we like it or not. Because some Charlie in government who we have elected as prime minister or chief minister is making all wrong decisions to support crony capitalism, right? He even prides himself on his political ignorance, sticks out his chest and says he hates politics. He doesn't know the imbecile that from his political non-participation and apathy comes the prostitute, the abandoned child, the robber, and worst of all, corrupt officials, the lackeys of exploitative multinational corporations. This is a thought, a very old thought by Bertolt Brecht. Any thoughts on this, sir? You spoke about the apathy earlier. Before we move on to the book.
Yeah. In fact, talking of apathy, there were two ways of handling it. One was people used to express concern about voter apathy, and the solution they were mostly offering was compulsory voting. I totally opposed it. I said compulsion and democracy don't go together. Our right to choose includes our right not to choose. In fact, interestingly, there have been several cases in the Supreme Court where the demand was that the right to vote should be declared a constitutional right. Court has upheld that the right to vote is not a constitutional right, it is a statutory right. However, very interestingly and significantly, in a judgment, famously known as Nota judgment, the Supreme Court has gone on to make not voting as a fundamental right, because as your right of nota, your right of expression, that it is your right. If you don't want to vote, it is your fundamental right. Now, in such a situation, to go for compulsory voting is, to me, totally undemocratic and illegal. Then, people used to say that Australia has compulsory voting, Singapore has compulsory voting. Why don't we learn from them? I talked to my Australian counterpart, Ed Killerstein was his name. We used to meet here, there, and many places. And I said that many people talk of Australia. How is your experience of compulsory voting? He says he's very unhappy. I said, why? I was quite taken aback. He says, we have a fine of $20 for non-voting, and we end up spending $2,000 to collect that $20 after a correspondence of 3 to 4 years. Then I said, after all that, you must be having 100% voting because it is compulsory and there is a fine. He said, no, after all that, we have 90% voting. And do you know, Jerry, at the time when I was talking to him, we just had elections in Tirupura, and we had 93.4% turnout, all by persuasion, all by voter education. If you can achieve something with love and persuasion, why do you need a danda? And secondly,
Right.
suppose we make it compulsory. Now, obviously, if you don't vote, you will be punished. And even if that punishment is a token fine of one
Right.
rupee, we have to go through a due process of law, because
Right.
after all, we are a civilized country. We have followed due process of law. And what is due process
Right.
of law? I'll send you a legal
Right.
notice that you have not voted. Why should I not fine you 100 rupees? Because, sorry, 1 rupee, because we have to go through a
Right.
due process, which means 30 crore court cases after every election will be started by us
Right.
alone. So our entire
Right.
system will collapse. All the lawyers will be happy, but the system will collapse. So it's not workable, and persuasion is working. Voter education is working. Every election is giving us higher than turnout than ever before. So what more do you need? It is working very well.
Right. So given to, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, that it's a democracy and we should not make things mandatory. But I think in a country like India with 1.3 billion Indians, where even educated people are actually illiterate because they think they're educated, but what they are merely, what they merely have is a degree because they went to some expensive school and college, right? And those are the same political illiterates as we're calling them, right? Now, in a country like India, yes, we should not in a democracy make things compulsory or mandatory. But when people don't even know their rights and duties, including IAS trainees, students, right? I remember speaking at the IAS function in Masuri around almost a decade ago. And when I asked people for what are your fundamental rights, none of them in the audience knew. When I asked them what are your fundamental duties, none of them knew. And I said, these are tomorrow's bureaucrats. And the director general at that time said, don't lose hope. That's why we called you here to speak to them. And right. But the point is, sir, when citizens don't know their fundamental rights and duties, and actually the responsibility to vote should have been a part of the fundamental duty. So then don't you think that somewhere that has to be implemented, because the constitution very clearly says that to enjoy your rights you need to fulfill your duties and responsibilities. But the point is people don't know and they call themselves educated. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on this, sir?
No, quite, you're quite right. There is very little information, very a tremendous lack of information, particularly about the fundamental duties. Nobody ever talks about it. We are all conscious of our rights, mind you. To say that
Right.
people are not aware of the rights, it comes to me as a surprise.
No,
Everybody
they,
knows.
they, they, they only know about right to speak, right to vote, which they talk about because that's part of one fundamental right. But they don't know the seven fundamental rights.
No.
They won't know it.
Right to vote is not a fundamental right, but of
Absolutely.
course,
So
persuasion
when I
may
ask
work.
them questions, they answer like that, and I say you got it all wrong. It's not a part of the right. Yes.
Yes, okay, you are okay. So, but
So they think they know because they like singing that song also, Sada Ha Kitte Rak. But until and unless push comes to shove, otherwise they don't wake up. So you always need an awakening in this country like Tata T. Jago re, jago re. Arey, what about jagte raho? कितने बार जगाएंगे आपको? Please go ahead.
well, by the way, Jagore was a very interesting campaign. And in fact, when
Yes,
we
yes.
started our voter education, we did lots of programs in all over the country. We did a very famous Pappu campaign in Delhi, which led to 14-15% increase in voter turnout. So we
Right,
have been able to convert the so-called educated people who never voted and bragged about it. We converted this into a statement of shame and embarrassment. Let me tell you about this Pappu campaign. There were, around those that time, 2010, 11, there was a very famous song, Pappu doesn't, cannot dance Sala. So it was a popular song. We made a parody that we created a Pappu who can dance, but whose fault was he did not vote. So we wanted to
right,
lampoon him. And the result
right,
was at the end, earlier, those who used to twirl their mustache, I'd never voted in my life. They were hiding their
right.
face and they were showing their marked finger. Look, I'm not a Pappu. I voted. So, we converted that same action of not voting from a fashion statement into a statement of shame and embarrassment.
Very
So
nice,
that is the power of
and
communication.
I'm proud of that campaign. Yeah, and that campaign really created a lot of awakening and inspired people to go and vote. On a lighter note, sir, was that campaign inspired by Rahul Gandhi, Pappu Khan Dance Pasala?
Come on, I was not making a political statement at all. I don't think that I don't. 2010 and 11, I think that term was not coined for him.
Right,
So it was
right.
just based on that
No,
song
no,
from the film.
right. Yes, I remember that song. That was from that Imran Khan movie. Yes, no, but that song also became synonymous with Mr. Rahul Gandhi after that. With all
No,
due
no,
respect to him,
that's a,
I was
that's
just
a,
asking on a lighter note. So I
that's
was
a,
asking you, sir, that in the face of the fact that most citizens of India don't, and especially the educated ones, don't know their fundamental rights and duties. Don't you think in the face of that truth, we need to do something to ensure that they fulfill their responsibilities to enjoy their rights?
yeah, I think that is also a flaw of our education system, that after
Right.
so many years of education, and it starts at school. These are things which should be taught in school, civics classes. But there was a study of when class 5 students were asked to read a book of class 2. Most of them could not read even class 2 book. If that is the quality of education, we need to look at the education quality, and so that these values, these important constitutional values, they are embedded in our youngsters from the beginning.
Right. And that's something which we are doing now. So we are actually starting something called the Rex Karmavir Global Student or Scholar Fellowship, where through the medium of volunteering and service, we are actually teaching them about their fundamental rights and duties and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, because we all need to realize we are not just citizens of India and forget the nationalism, because we need to understand we are citizens of the world. It's a connected world today, because no matter is internal or external. Any matter which is affecting the people is a global human rights issue, because any injustice to any one person anywhere in the world is an injustice towards all of humanity. And I'll come to that later. Coming to your books, when I started writing my book series Karma Kari, I was inspired because you would see that slide on the on the can you see it on the slideshow?
Yes, I can.
uh, and I announced it in 2010, just a week before leaving for Berlin for the electoral reforms meeting. And a journalist told me, "Who will read stories of ordinary heroes in your book?" Right? My book is called the Karma Kari book series, where I write stories of very ordinary people who are doing extraordinary things and changing the country, changing society, and changing the world every day. And she said, write about some Bollywood hero like Shah Rukh Khan or a cricketer like Tendulkar. Then people will buy your books. I said, but they don't inspire me, because you can see their silence and apathy right now. So this is in 2010. I said, they don't inspire me. These people are changing the world every day, and they inspire me. And nobody's telling their stories, because whether it's the newspapers or magazines, we only profile celebrity. We don't tell stories of ordinary people and unsung heroes. So I said, I want to be their historian. Now, what inspired you, sir, to start writing your books? And can we see your book, The Population Myth?
Yeah, on the population. Yeah, yeah. This one.
Yes.
Uh,
I mean, this is your second book. But prior to that, you have another book, which, like you said, is in the fifth reprint now.
yeah,
But
yeah.
what
But
inspired you to start writing?
it started absolutely accidentally. In
Okay.
1995, I was Joint Secretary, Ministry of Youth Affairs, when the UNFPA country director, who was a
Right.
Canadian or not of Indian origin, but a European Canadian. So he came to see
Right.
me, asking me to write an approach paper on family planning among the Muslims. So I was quite
Right.
taken aback, because I was neither an Islamic scholar, I still am not, nor had I ever worked in family planning department, except of course in the field as SDM and DM. We used to have our sterilization targets, and you remember the emergency. I was an SDM during emergency for some time, so that was our only exposure to family planning. So he was offering me a pretty decent honorarium of 1.5 lakh rupees for a month,
Hmm.
whereas my monthly salary was only 5,000. So, but
Wow.
somehow an inner voice told me that when he persuaded me that I can write and I should write. So I said, okay, my condition is that I will charge you nothing. I'll do it free. He said he was taken aback. He said people come to us are demanding money and put pressure. And here you're saying you'll do it without money. I said, I will do it without money. He said, no, we can't take free work. We have to charge. And therefore, we settled on an amount of 1 rupee. Now, whether it is 1 rupee or 1 million rupees, it is a financial transaction. I said, you write to me, I'll take Government of India permission. We will sign a contract and let us see what comes out of it. So instead of 1 month, it took me 5 months. But what I discovered was my changing of my mind. It opened the windows of my mind. Because even I thought Islam was against family planning and other things I was totally ignorant about. So I wrote a 33-page paper, which was very well received all over. I gave lots of lectures on that, for which also I did not charge any money. Now, this inner voice story turned out to be prophetic. 5 years later, in 2000, in the year 2000, I was in London, where my daughter was studying. I was staying with her in her hostel. When I received a call from somebody who introduced himself as also Dr. Quraishi, President of Muslim Doctors Association of UK. He said, Mr. Quraishi, we have read your paper and we have certain issues to discuss with you. And I thought the tone was threatening and I didn't want to get beaten up in London. So in any case, I was coming back the next morning and I said, look, I'm going back. So he said, what time is the flight? Which flight? They landed up at the airport. And, they made a statement which is still ringing in my mind. They said, Mr. Quraishi, family planning is a Western conspiracy against Islam, and they hire mercenaries like you through UN agencies to write such papers. Now, every word of this sentence is significant, because if I have not even collected 1 rupee, because now if otherwise I'll be hired. And of course, that hiring was done by UNFPA, and that would make me a mercenary. And I'll be writing something just for money and not out of my conscience. So fortunately, that inner voice turned out to be very prophetic, because then with that moral authority, I pounced on those guys. I said, look, I have not taken any money. And therefore, it's not that I'm writing just for commercial purpose, for money. So, and I'm willing to discuss and argue. Howsoever anti-Islam the Western world could be and is, and I'm with you on that. But this cannot be their conspiracy, because it is not that they are producing 10 children and asking us to produce 1 or 2 or 3. So because our numbers are not their threat. Bangladesh, Indonesia, wherever Muslim population become double or three times, it is no threat to USA. In fact, more population will mean more mouths and bigger markets. So
more consumers
more
for the capitalistic markets.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So those guys, of course, did not expect this response from me. And they said, no, you please read this literature, that literature. I said, I'll read all this, send me more, I'll read all that. But your allegation that I've done it only for money is absolutely wrong, because I've not taken any money.
When you had not taken any money.
Yes, when I've not taken any money. So since then, for the last 20 years, my friends were asking me to expand it into a book. And it has taken me 25 years. Unfortunately, I used COVID as a great occasion, because it confined me to home, and this study on this desk, I was able to finish what I could not do in 25 years. So, and interestingly, what was happening to this book, why it took so long? Because every time it was nearing conclusion, the new data will come in. NFHS, National Family Health Survey, done every 5 years. So by the time I am about to finish my book, there you have NFHS 2, then NFHS 3, then NFHS 4. So now NFHS 5 is also around the corner. Some data has been released. Fortunately, my book has come out before that. Fortunately, through all these NFHS data, my hypothesis never changed. Whatever I had said actually was reinforced by the subsequent data. And I hope NFHS 5 also will only confirm what I've written and not distort it.
Right. And you've taken some thoughts from the Quran and the Hadith also. And
Yes.
would you like to share some of the myths that you have debunked in the book before I ask you some specific questions which people have been messaging me from the morning?
Yes. In fact, there is one chapter which is about the ethics of Islam. As I told you, that the general perception was that Islam is against family planning, and I also thought that. But I found when I studied the Quran, nowhere in the Quran family planning has been prohibited. And whatever Islamic view is mentioned in books, it is based on interpretation. There are some interpretations against family planning. There are many more in favor of family planning. And my own interpretation, which I have given in this book, is in favor of family planning.
Right.
I'll just mention one verse of the Quran, which said that Allah is telling young people that, oh, young men, to keep yourself chaste, you should marry where you have the wherewithal. Now, whatever was not clear from the Quran, people would go to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and ask him for clarification. A poor man went to the Prophet wasallam, and said that I'm a poor man. I have my physical need, sexual need, but I don't have the wherewithal. What should I do? So Prophet repeated that verse and supplemented it by saying that till you have the wherewithal, resort to fasting, because fasting suppresses sexual desires. Now, Quranic injunction, so then reinforced by the Prophet by giving a method, giving a way out. There is another hadith. Hadith is what Prophet said or what Prophet did, as reported. That is hadith, and that is the next year of Sharia. We believe in the Quran, the supreme, after that the hadith. So there is
Right.
another interesting hadith which clinches the issue. Somebody went to the Prophet ﷺ, saying that, I already have many children, I don't want any more. I want to stop and I want to practice al-azl, which is a withdrawal method. Withdrawal, that was the only method known. So he said, but a Jew was saying that that is a minor infanticide. So Prophet replied, no, what he said is wrong. Jew lied, Jew lied. In other words, withdrawal method is fine. Go ahead and do the method. Now, one Quranic verse and the two ahadith together, I think, are a complete recipe for family planning. And there are many more. We talk about women's health, the children's health, the quality of upbringing, the quality of people, rather than the numbers. So there are so many verses from the Quran which I have given in original with great care. And I have come to the conclusion that surprisingly, Islam talked of family planning at 1400 years ago when there was no population pressure anywhere in the world. It was so
Right.
much ahead of time. And that is absolutely amazing.
Right. And I'm very happy that you clarified all of that, because, I also believe that Islam was formed on certain scientific principles, right from the way hands were to be washed. And I must tell you this, around 2017, I was invited by the Sayyidina Buranuddin to work with all his Quran teachers. And they were teaching Quran to the children by rote. And I said, what are you doing? That's not the way you teach anything, because you need to make people think, what is the ethos of each word, what is the essence of each word, because if they don't understand the spirit of the word, then anybody can twist their mind. And I think that is where people live in this blissful ignorance, because they don't know what the spirit of the word means. And it's not just in Islam, but and you clarified today that Islam talks about family planning. But in Christianity, and I don't practice any religion again, but in Christianity, again, we are against family planning. So because every child is considered a gift of God, right? Or so you kind of ban abortion. A girl dies in Ireland the because of no abortion being possible over there, and she had health issues and required to undergo an abortion, and she dies because they wouldn't abort. And Ireland as a country changed the law, but the Vatican City and the Catholic Church went against the government law and said this cannot be allowed, you cannot allow abortion, so they had to reverse that law again. Now, Now, there are certain blind beliefs, whether it is Christians or Muslims or Hindus or Sikhs. We blindly believe things and dogmas and false traditions that are passed on to us. Could it be that those blind beliefs and false traditions are leading to this entire concept that we need to kind of have more children? Because that is a question which many are struggling with. Because when I sent out this post, it says that, the book delves into the Quran and the Hadith to show how Islam might have been one of the first religions in the world to actually advocate smaller families.
Where did you?
And people have been sending me
Where
messages
is
from the
where
morning
is this
in my
quotation from? What is this
sorry.
quotation from?
This is from the description of the
Oh,
book on
okay. All
Amazon.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now the
Yeah, right. So this is the way HarperCollins
yeah.
has uploaded the book. So people are saying that, how is this possible? Because so one person, and from the morning I've been blocking a lot of people because they think that I'm trying to promote a right wing agenda. So I'm having a book conversation, and I don't believe in right wing or left wing. They're all the same, right? So one person sends me just a fun fact: religion that allows to marry 5 wives is also advocating smaller families. Isn't it a dichotomy? And I wrote to him, that is another myth that is not understood by narrow minds, that you can have 5 wives. So I wanted to clarify this for all the people who are watching, so that some myths which are promoted by vested interest and people with hidden agendas are clarified for all of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Correct. The current narrative of the right wing has been from the beginning that number one, Muslims produce too many children,
Right.
and it is disturbing demographic balance. And they say it is an organized conspiracy by the Muslims to overtake the Hindus, and they use polygamy for increasing their population. And hum पांच हमारे 25 हम चार हमारे 40, the kind of slogans you hear even from very senior leaders. Now, I have started my book by accepting the first two allegations that Muslims, of course, have the highest birth rate, and also the demographic balance has been upset a little. From 84% Hindus, they have come down to 79.8 in 60 years, and Muslims have gone up from 9.8% to 14.2%. Accepted, admitted. Yes, but the Muslims are taking up family planning very, very fast, and their acceptance of family planning rate is higher than that of the Hindus also, which is why the gap is narrowing. And in any case, it is important to understand that it is not that when a Hindu family has had 2 children and Muslims had 10, the gap was at the most just one child more. Just one child more. If
Right.
Hindus has five children, Muslims had 6 children. So, and that thing has now come down to half a child. From 1.1 was the maximum gap for 30, 40 years ago. And now the gap has come down to 0.5. And this will also come to near zero in another 20, 30 years. Now, whether Muslims are going to overtake the Hindus, I asked a friend of mine, Professor Dinesh Singh, a great mathematician who was the Vice Chancellor of Delhi University. He, along with another professor, Ajay Kumar, together they did a mathematical model for me. I asked them in how many years Muslims will overtake the Hindus. He said, forget about it, they never will. Not in 600 years, not in 1,000 years, they never will. And that model I have published
Right.
in their words in this book. So that must be
So I,
reassured.
I and I would like to interject then. I hope all the people in the audience who are listening, especially my Hindu friends who think Hindu khatre mein hai, very clearly, aap khatre mein nahi ho.
Yeah. Now, let me also explain the polygamy thing. The allegation is that every Muslim has 4 wives and 25 children, 20 children, to make it hum panch hamare 25 means me, my 4 wives, 5, and my 20 children to become 25, or hum char hamare 40.
Right.
So now this is the propaganda. Show me one Muslim in the country who has 4 wives and 25 children, not to
Right.
talk 4 wives and 40 children. Right. Now, polygamy, there are 2, 3 things interestingly about polygamy. Number one, what does Islam say? Islam, there is only one verse in the Quran which talks of polygamy, and it says that you can marry 2, 3, or 4. Now, provided you can treat them equally, which
Right.
is very, very difficult, and therefore marry one.
Right.
Now, I suppose after reading this, I immediately go looking for my second wife. And every Muslim says that, this is only a permission and not a condition for
Right.
Muslims. And
Right.
that also a conditional permission, one condition that you will treat them equally.
Right.
I say that there are actually two conditions. The second condition, they don't talk about it. And what is that? This context of this verse was orphans and widows are being discussed. Because that was the time when in tribal warfare men will be killed and there will be so many widows and children will be left behind. God is talking about those widows and is saying that treat the widows and orphans with compassion, with fairness. Do not misappropriate their property. Do not substitute their good thing with your bad thing. And in fact, from among them, marry 2, 3, or 4. Now, from among them means from among those widows. So when I'm going to look for my second wife, I should remember the condition is that I should be looking for a widow. Because she needs economic security, and when I bring in a second wife, she should be treated equally with my first and original wife, and not as
Right.
a sex slave and not as a domestic servant. So that is the objective of this thing. Now, thirdly and most importantly, in India, polygamy statistically is just not possible because there is you must have heard of adverse gender ratio. Now, what is the adverse gender ratio? For every 1,000 men, there are 940 women.
Right.
Now, there is no, the second woman is not even available. Even your wife is not, statistically not a full wife. She is a 0.9 wife. My wife is a 0.9 wife. So
Okay.
where is the second woman coming from?
Right.
So it is this allegation is totally absurd. It is mischievous. It is basically for political polarization.
Right.
And because my study has found that actually, the factors which influence the high birth rate, I had admitted the Muslims have the highest birth rate. Now, what is the reason for highest birth rate? Partly that they believe that Islam is against it. But actually, the real factors are three: literacy, income, and service delivery. Now, as the literacy goes up, the number of children goes down
Right.
across the community, for every community. As income goes up, children go down. As service delivery improves, children go down. We found that there is an entire chapter on what is the status of Muslims in these socio-economic indicators. And we find in all of them, they're at the bottom. They are the least educated, least literate, which is unfortunate. They are the very poor. Now, nobody is talking about their education and income. On the contrary, what we hear is don't do business with them, don't buy vegetables from them. Now, do you
Right.
want them to do family planning and you want to make them poorer? So, if you want them to do family planning, please improve their economic status, educational status.
Right.
They are not talking about it. Either they don't know or
Right.
they don't care.
Absolutely. I'm happy that you clarified that, because this is something I've been talking about in a different context. United States of America, which is again a very mindless kind of a country, as far as they call themselves the world's largest, greatest democracy. We are the world's largest. And I've always kind of found that to be funny, because they're far from being a democracy. It's an oligarchy disguised as a democracy. And same is happening with India. And they started something called War on Terrorism, which was about carpet bombing, killing terrorists, etc. And I always said, even if you kill Osama bin Laden, that will only kind of give rise to more people embracing terrorism. Because if you really want to address the issues of terrorism, you need to go to the root cause, which is illiteracy, poverty, marginalization. People are not poor by choice. People are impoverished because of the capitalistic imbalances in the world. And I'm happy that you said that also, that, if we want to stay with peace and oneness, we need to treat everybody equally and ensure that the socio-economic conditions for all communities are are equal, and you provide an equal opportunity for everyone to thrive rather than feel stifled. And yet today, in the current day and age, we are completely stifled. because you can see the polarization all over social media. वो मुसलमान है, वो सिख है, वो खालिस्तानी है, वो पाकिस्तानी है. The narrative has changed in the past few years from 2014. You polarized an entire community by giving them this false notion of a Hindu state. You're by giving them this false notion of Hindu khatre mein hai. And I always say this, Hindu khatre mein hai, par Hindu मुसलमानों से, ईसाइयों से और सिखों से खतरे में नहीं है, हिंदू हिंदुओं से खतरे में. क्योंकि the bigger Brahmin will come for you tomorrow, saying that you're the Dalit who has to be gotten rid of. So, and people are not realizing that because they're falling for all these false narratives. And before I go to that, so I want to ask you one more question, which is related to Islam and this entire concept of polygamy. And I'm happy you clarified that. But time and again, we see unrest, killing, shooting, bomb blasts happening because somebody makes a statement about somebody or the other, randomly makes a statement or a cartoon about the Prophet Muhammad and talks about him and his 7 or 8-year-old wife, Aisha. Do you want to clarify some thoughts on that for the audience?
No, actually, I don't think we should go beyond the discussion on our book, which is the idea, because we start going into so many issues of the religion. I'm not equipped. I'm not Islamic scholar, as I say. But the only thing I would say that 30 years ago, before 1979, before Russian invasion of Afghanistan, there was peace in the entire Muslim world. So to throw the Russians out, the Americans funded the Pakistanis to create mullahs and Taliban, and in the name of religion, and they created the concept of jihad, holy jihad, to throw them out. And once the Russians were thrown out, now these indoctrinated and armed mullahs were left to fend for themselves, and they turned their guns towards America. Now, in the Gulf region also, Saddam Hussein and Colonel Gaddafi, there was total peace in their country. Of course, they were allegations. Some people were prosecuted, and 1,000 were killed, and 5,000 were killed. Now millions have been killed. So the Muslim terrorists and this phenomenon is entirely creation of the West. For political reasons. In fact, I remember in 1992 when I joined as Joint Secretary Youth Affairs in the Government of India, we had a one-day briefing session with the Intelligence Bureau people. And one expert there, international security expert, he said, now that Soviet Union has broken down, America will have to manufacture an enemy other than communism. And that enemy will be Islam. So this Islam as an enemy of the Western world is a creation, is a manufacture, basically to keep their countries, justified for the kind of warfare and arms selling and everything. They want Gulf in trouble all the time. So America and Israel together, and India is happy with that kind of philosophy. So this is entirely political, because 40 years ago there was a peace in the world on this score. In the entire Islamic world, there was no violence. It has only been manufactured after the breakdown of Soviet Union.
Right. And it is an organized scheme that they have done to paint and taint that all Muslims are terrorists or all terrorists are Muslims. And I remember I was speaking in 2002. I had done some work against the pogrom that was done in Gujarat, and I was speaking in this large event. And a few people from some Hindutva factions, the right-wing factions, geared me and said, why are you taking sides with the Muslims? Don't you realize that they are the people who started terrorism and started smuggling and are all terrorists? I said, this is the problem with all of you. You all are so misinformed. You all are so ignorant about the reality of life. Because first of all, the first known smuggler in India was not a Muslim. He was a Gujarati. It was the Dolakia family. So I clarified that for him. And I said, why are you giving credits to the Muslim for starting terrorism? The Muslims did not start terrorism. The Christians did. The first known terrorist outfit was the IRA, the Irish Republican Army. And the fact of the matter is that wars and violence have been promoted by religious fanatics for their own hidden agendas and for transfer of power. And I think people at large should realize that and learn to live with oneness without being polarized by any of these people with their hidden agendas and vested interests. And thank you for clarifying that. So in the past
Yes,
few
then let me just one interjection that even to call IRA Christian is wrong because IRA was a totally political movement. The
right,
fact that Irish people are Christian, they happen to be Christian, but
right,
Christianity had nothing to do with their terrorism. They
absolutely.
wanted freedom from UK, and for 150 years they launched this movement. It was totally a
Yeah.
political movement.
And
So
thank you for clarifying that. The reason I was just being lighthearted with those right-wing fellows is for them to understand that it is not the Muslims who started terrorists. That's why I made it a point to put this across to them. But thank you for clarifying that, because no terrorist is of any religion. Because if you truly believed in religion, religion teaches you love, humanity, and oneness. So where is this hatred coming from? Anybody who promotes any kind of hatred cannot belong to any religion. Uh, that said, sir, you spoke about the holy jihad, and jihad actually means the inner struggle, the struggle to do what is right, the struggle to stay on the righteous path. And every religion, whether it is Sanatan Dharma, because there's no religion called Hindu, it is Sanatan Dharma, and it is the path of righteousness or truth, or Islam, or Sikhism, or Christianity, teaches you to follow the path of righteousness and truth. And I was born in a Christian family, but whenever I ask Christians, hey, what was Jesus Christ's biggest teaching? Now that you are telling me that you're religious, explain to me. And they can't understand what his biggest teaching was. They don't know. Jesus Christ's biggest teaching was forgiveness. And it's very difficult for many Christian people to even forgive their own brother or sister, because everything is kind of, you know, polarized by greed, by lust for power, and so many other things. So my final question to you is, in the past few years, we've seen several protests happening in India, student protests, and then they are branded as anti-national. Women of Shaheen Bagh, anti-national. Farmers protesting. Oh, all Sikh farmers with coming out with their pajeros, Khalistanis. Now, Ticket has joined them. Jats from Haryana and UP and the world over have joined them. The entire nation has risen. And yet, the chatter on Facebook is this is all the rich farmers who are protesting for no reason at all. And then everybody is getting branded as an anti-national. What are your thoughts on this? So what do you see happening in the country currently, and where do you think we are going with this?
well, basically, it is a political polarization, very well designed and being executed with the meticulous detail. Very sad and unfortunate for the country because it is totally divisive. It is creating hate, environment of hate, and the sooner we can get rid of it, the better. But at the moment, because of social media, which is a very dangerous new phenomenon, it can set the country on fire in 30 seconds, and the forces, the divisive forces, are using social media with great effect, and it is doing harm to the country. It may look like a immediate term political gain, but in the long term, it is doing harm to the country. And I only hope and pray that this is a short-term phenomenon, and this too shall pass.
Yes, I hope so too. And I always say that the Congress is responsible for what is happening today, because they did so many things wrong, right from the emergency to the blatant and stark corruption which we saw before 2014. But that said, today we have a very covert type of emergency which has been launched, and people are not even realizing it. And I hope people wake up to that, and wake up to the idea that we are not a Hindu state, we are India, which celebrates unity and diversity. And our only religion is the Constitution of India. No
Yeah.
other religion.
Yes, I would not like to comment on politics also, because that's not, I don't comment on politics, but I would like to mention in the context of my book, the purpose of my book is to bring the two communities together, to
Right.
remove the misunderstanding. And my dedication is to the unity in diversity, India's unique identity. And I've
Absolutely.
written at the end of my introduction that if I succeed in converting even 1 or 2% of people from disharmony and hatred into understanding, I think I would have done my job. The fact I've donated my charity, the royalty from this book to charity, and because I think the family planning, understanding about family planning is my national contribution. I
Right.
hope I've succeeded in it, even to some extent. Let us see, the time will show.
Absolutely, and thank you for sharing that you've given all your royalties to charity. That is very noble of you, and I completely agree with you, Dr. Qureshi. Population today is a big problem, not just for India but for the entire world. We in India, especially politicians, like to use these two words, demographic dividend. And I always said it's not a demographic dividend; it's a demographic curse. Because if we don't have jobs, if we don't have employment, if we don't have ways to keep the youth and the people engaged, they will go on to the path of anarchy and crime. And that's a time bomb that we are sitting on, because there are no jobs out there.
Yeah, just let me just finish on that note that in the end, I have mentioned that actually Hindus and Muslims are on this. It is not a Hindu versus Muslim issue. They're on the same end of the spectrum.
Absolutely.
Muslims have the highest birth rate because they have the highest illiteracy. Who has the second highest birth rate? The Hindus, because they
Right.
are also poor. Their
Right.
literacy rate is also low. So actually,
Absolutely.
they are on the same end of the spectrum. They're in the same boat. And we have to, secondly, although the right wing often appeals to the Hindus to produce more children, 10 children, so that the Muslims don't overtake. I said, I have told my Muslim audience that don't get carried away by that. Even if whatever they do, you should practice family planning proactively. That is good for you and for your community and for the nation. So I hope that some understanding prevails.
And I hope people get a lot of wisdom and insights from your book. I've got a lot of learning from your book. To conclude, sir, may I request you to read a small paragraph from your book which you think is the dearest to your heart?
Well, I think I would read the journey of the book, which is in the acknowledgement in the end. Let me,
Very nice. Go ahead.
yeah, one second. Where has it gone? Right. 2, 3 paragraph. The idea of this book was born in a surprise development when country director UNFPA Tevia Abrams visited me in my office in 1994, accompanied by his program officer Ina Singh. He said he wanted me to write a strategy paper for family planning among the Muslims in India. This was a strange request, as I was neither an Islamic scholar nor a family planning expert. Never having worked in the health ministry, either in the state of Haryana, my service cadre, or in the central government. Not sure what I would write, I tried my best to excuse myself, but Tevia wouldn't budge. The offer was also financially attractive, 30 times my take-home monthly salary of 5,000. Seeing his adamance, I agreed to do it, but an inner voice said I should do it pro bono. He insisted that I get paid, so we settled for a remuneration, 1 rupee. I requested him to send me a formal proposal on which I would get Government of India's approval. That settled, I started looking for ideas. I had no clue what would be the outcome. When I started the project, I was under the impression, like everyone else, that Islam is against family planning. But what I discovered during my research was an eye opener. I found that the reality was just the opposite. Islam was not only not against family planning, was actually the pioneer of the concept. What helped me understand the Islamic position was a fascinating book titled Family Planning in the Legacy of Islam by Professor Abdul Rahim Omran of the greatest Islamic university, Al-Azhar, Cairo. It took me 5 months instead of the stipulated one to complete the paper. When ready, it caused quite a few ripples because of its unusual findings and recommendations. I sounded many ulama and imam to make sure I don't end up getting fatwas against myself. contrary to my apprehensions, I found extraordinary support from them as I was, and so on. It goes on. So that's it.
Excellent. So thank you for telling us more about the making of the book and how it basically inspired you to get onto this journey of explaining the population myth. And I think it's been a very great learning for me to get so much clarity. And I hope for all the viewers too, because you debunked a lot of myths today about polygamy, about how, Islam probably was one of the first religions to actually talk about small families. And I think large families are not just in Hindu or uh, Muslim families; they're also in Catholic families. My mother's family had 10 children. So did my father's family have 10 children. So I think we all need to become a little more responsible, because the research shows you that when the world population touches 9 billion is when there will be scarcity of food even for the middle class, and the great Indian middle class should wake up to that fact and be worried about that, because we are sitting on a time bomb called climate change. We are sitting on a time bomb of scarcity of food. We are sitting on a time bomb of a population burst which will happen. And I think those are the pertinent issues that need to be paid attention to, rather than just polarizing people and creating divisiveness. Thank you so much, Dr. Quraishi. Pleasure learning with you again after so many years. And thank you. If there are any closing insights you want to share with the viewers, please feel free to do so.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Namaste and Jai Hind.
Namaste.